And we are live on the Icecast Live. Good evening, everybody, and good evening to the return of Ollie McNamee. How you doing, Ollie?
I'm all right. I'm all right, Shane. How are we? It feels like it has been a long time. It has been a long time. Last week, you had your hands full with the indie round table. The week before that, I was watching one of my favourite punk bands, Fucked Up, in Nottingham, and bumped
Is
into
that the name of the band, or
That's
is
the
that
name
your
of the
state?
band. They're called Fucked Up, and I bumped into the lead singer in the bar just before the gig. I had a lovely little 10-minute chat with him. Just caught up and then just let him get off to do his sound check. So yeah, it was really nice. But it's been a long time, and I wouldn't have missed the guest this evening for the world.
Oh, yeah, indeed. I mean, the last time we saw this chap was in 2017 in Birmingham at the Ice Show. I know, can you believe it's
That's
that
a long time ago? I can't believe it's that long ago.
And he hasn't changed. He still looks really young. He still looks exactly the same. I don't know about you, but I've sort of deteriorated.
Yeah, no, not me. I decided to stop growing old at the age of 40. So that's it. A few more grey hairs, that's it. I just made a decision, yeah.
Good on you, mate. Good on you. So, of course, tonight, our guest is the one and only John Tyler Christopher, one of the greatest cover artists in the business at the moment, and an
at the moment of all time. Come on, let's throw some hyperbole in there. Let him dig his way out of it by denying all of it. No.
The greatest cover artist of all time, Mr. John Tyler Christopher. Yes, okay. I think some people would definitely agree with that. He's definitely one of the nicest people of all time. That is true as well. We had a great time when he came over to see us in Birmingham, and we were honoured when he did come over because he's not too keen on flying, and so he made a special effort to come and see us.
And I seem to remember he did not stop sketching until the last person got a sketch.
Definitely.
And they were all free sketches as well.
An amazing guy.
Amazing.
Yeah, so generous with his time. What a great show that was, and it's just great to have him back.
St. John, the greatest cover artist alive. There we go. How's that for an introduction?
Excellent, thank you. Okay, Sam, let's run that VT and get him on. And good evening and welcome back to the Icecast Live, and welcome John Tyler Christopher, or should I say St. John?
That'll do. That'll work for me, definitely. I mean, being the greatest cover artist in the history of not just comics. I mean, let's just be bluntly honest. I mean, Time magazine, any of the periodicals. I mean, I've got them all beat, right?
So. Who needs the Renaissance?
Yeah.
Rembrandt who? What? No, that guy was an amateur. Come on.
Well, now you're talking about, I'd like to see a Rembrandt X-Men cover.
That would be amazing. Yeah. I mean, Michelangelo, he never did Star Wars action figures. So, I think I got him beat, right?
Exactly. Definitely. You've got him on that one. Actual Dracula, good afternoon. Well, thank you, Dracula. But I'm a bit worried because the sun's still up, mate. You know, get yourself...
It's dark somewhere in the world.
Yeah, definitely. So welcome to the show, John. It's really good to have you on, mate. And of course, it has been a while since we've seen each other.
2017, that's nearly a decade ago.
It's insane. It's so that trip was such like a monumental moment. I mean, I still use or tell stories about that all the time. It was just such a great time. I mean, Ollie, he was generous enough after the show to take us around. He shared with us street art of Birmingham, and it was just an incredible educational experience for my daughters. Our kids were able to hang out. It was so special. And if I remember correctly, we went to an Indian restaurant.
We did.
Yeah, the Indian restaurants, really, it's Gaylord. It's still there now, or is
Yeah.
Gaylord's the hairdressers next door to it?
It's Taj Mahal, I think it's
Right.
called. Like Gaylord
there is one.
sounds
There
more
is
like
one.
a hairdresser.
No, but it does.
Best curry I've
Yeah.
ever had, man, bar none. It was so
amazing.
incredible.
Mm.
And I
got
drank
a
warm
break.
beer, which I mean, that in and of itself was just magical.
It is a British tradition.
Have
to
you done
drink warm
much
beer.
travelling since then, John? Or are you still quite
Not at all.
versed? Really? Wow.
No,
And do you do a lot of travelling within America, given how vast and diverse America is? To us Brits, it feels like 4 or 5 different countries in one.
as an American, it feels the same way sometimes.
Yeah, but
unfortunately.
in a good way as well as in a bad way. Do you know what I mean? You
No,
go to one
100%.
part of America, it's very different to another part of America. And that's what I mean about, it being so diverse in that way. So being a person who doesn't travel abroad, do you tend to do a lot of staycations, as we call them in the UK?
Yeah, well, I mean, like, I believe I might have flown since then, because I went to a couple celebrations. You know, when Disney says jump, you say how high, kind of a deal.
Yeah.
But outside of that, no, I have not, because I don't travel like ever. In fact, I haven't really done many shows since then. I kind of stopped. I mean, especially once COVID hit, like it just kind of really wrecked my world. And I'm just starting to kind of get back on the circuit. But I mean, I enjoy. The challenge is my wife loves to travel. I mean, I think we even joked about this at the show. Like, I've been trying to convince the world that maybe like she's actually the artist, and I've just, through some misogynistic way of like, we just use my face and my name and let her just take credit for all the artwork, and then she can travel all over the world and do it, and I'll just kind of be able to not fly. But no, I travel when I can, but not really, man.
Mm.
Now, you say you're just getting back into it after COVID. Now, I remember speaking to you all those moons ago, and I was always taken by the fact that you had a very clear system in mind. Don't oversaturate the market. Don't overwork yourself. Don't overburden yourself. You still seem to follow what is a model for success for you, but equally, I think keeps the hunger up for every new cover that you do.
Mm.
Yeah, well, that's a great question and topic of conversation. I really look at, like, I'm a professional artist, right? Like, I'm not just like, I love art, but I made the decision moons ago to make this a profession and a business. And in doing so, like, I've got to take into consideration a lot of different factors, right? Like I kind of, one of my things that I feel like I'm, one of my strengths at least, is I know what I'm good at and where I'm lacking. And one of the things oh my gosh.
There we are. Thanks, Sam.
One of the things that, like, I know where I rank, right? Like, I look at so many of the other artists out today that are so much more talented than I will ever dream of becoming. And I can see that, but I can realize kind of where my strengths are. And part of that is my business acumen and my ability to understand how to build a brand, how to build a set, how to build a demand for what I do. And, it's one of those things where, as an artist, you can just create like banger after banger after banger, but we're living in like this ecosystem, right, where everyone now is kind of doing that. And again, acknowledging where I kind of fit into that. So I really strove for years to kind of like, how do you set up a series? That was one of the big things I did, because when I first started doing the action figure covers, like what Scotty Young was really one of the only other people doing that with the baby variants.
Yeah.
And I was able to work with one of my dearest friends, George Balliard at Marvel, to get the action figure covers going. And that was Marvel's bag, right? Like that was a thing, and I did whatever they told me to do and however often they told me to do. But the negative space, when I decided to start wanting to incorporate that, it really became something that like I've owned that for a long time. And I want to make sure when I say owned, I don't be misinterpreted as like it's mine, because that's I hate when people are like, oh, did you see so-and-so did a negative space and they're stealing that off of you, or so-and-so did an action figure cover and it's like they're stealing, like they're not stealing that. Like Coles Phillips darn near created the negative space concept, and this was like what, 1908 or something like that.
Yeah. And I think Frank Miller would have something to say about it as well with his work.
Exactly. So many artists use that. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think one of the things that I strove to do was create something that can be identifiable with my work and what I do in a particular way. And then again, with the negative space, not overdo it. Not like I want to try and keep it sane, if that makes sense, right?
And special as well. You know, you want to keep it a special thing, don't you? If you, like you said before, if you just churn them out over and over again, the novelty soon wears off, and then people aren't appreciating how good the art is because they're thinking it is more of a concept. Whereas if you just do a few, they can really, savor each piece.
Yeah, well, and it's like, approaching it. The negative space actually was funny. It started with something. The first negative space piece I ever did was in high school.
Wow.
And I did it basically as like almost like a form of therapy for me, because I really over render. Like that's something that I've always just really struggled with. Is I tend to. I'm pretty sure I have like a case of OCD, like maybe a mild case. Like, because I remember like when I used to work on Dungeons and Dragons back in the day, like I have to render like every single piece of scale mail or every piece of ring mail, and it was just killing me, man.
Yeah.
So with the negative space, it was like, how can I say more by saying less? And then it also helped work with one of the things that I feel is a strength of mine, which is like my design sensibility. I used to do graphic design work a lot. And so, to be able to look at the character and determine like, okay, how does this work with the costume? How do you pose the character? That's what became really important to me in dealing with that. And it helps kind of make me work in a different mindset almost.
Yeah, definitely. I love the juxtaposition of like, you've got that simplicity of the blank space, and then there is that lovely rendering on the faces and the figures, and it's just a great way of working, I think. And it just suits, as you say, it suits your skills so well, with the design. How long does it take you to do one of these, John, on average?
Probably almost a little less than a week.
All right.
And it really just depends, because I mean, the big thing, you're only seeing the finished product. Like, I mean, to get the anatomy correct, like I'm literally, for each one of these, there's a full drawing of them. I pencil all the areas that you don't see to make sure that the anatomy is lining up. Make sure the folds and the creases of the negative space are kind of working out. Like if you look at the Scarlet Witch, like the fact that her shoulder cape thing is kind of folded up a little bit more in certain areas. So that's why it takes a lot more time than just what you're seeing. And I think most artists, that's the case.
Yeah, I think it's. I think you're right there. More so on this because you've got so much negative space. But I think a lot of times people don't appreciate what goes on, behind the scenes when you're designing something like this, because it is more than just illustration, isn't it? It is a design as well.
Yeah, it's like that funny like old adage about like pretentious jazz music, where it's like, it's not the notes they're playing, it's the notes they're not playing. It's the key. And
jazz music's pretentious.
There you go. Ooh, gotta be careful with that one, Ollie.
Except the Gil Scott Heron.
Are you a fan of jazz music, John?
There's like some electro jazz, like more like moderny, like weird, like acid jazz and stuff that I dig on.
Anything with the rap over it, you mean? Like, like Gangstar or something like that. That's the
love
kind of
that,
jazz
yes.
I like.
Yes. and jazz influence, what was it? Bowie's last album was like had some like weird jazz elements to it.
Yeah.
It was super rad.
That was awesome. Yeah. Black Star, absolutely amazing. Yeah.
So where did the idea of the negative space come from? Because obviously the Star Wars brand has got so much life still in it, particularly as more and more sort of different series and different characters are created. Where did the negative space? Because it does look. I mean, you have owned it in the way that I feel you mean, rather than no one used this idea. You've made it your own. It still looks like a one of your covers. There's no mistaking it. But like you say, it's got such a great through design on the whole thing from start to finish. And this Iron Man's a great example of that.
Thank you. Like I said, it started in high school with that. Years later, so I'd always wanted to be a comic book artist. Like literally never dreamed of, I was going to say playing the Super Bowl, but I don't know if that's a euphemism or an analogy you guys would understand.
FA Cup for us over here, but we get the idea.
We get it.
Yeah,
we get it.
Yeah, like I never wanted to be an actor or musician. Like I just wanted to draw comics, and so I was also always told as a child that like I'm never going to be able to be an artist. Like flat out, that was something that was really instilled in me. And
is that because you were drawing a cartoon style all the time, or what?
Yeah, well, I would play with just different styles. I mean, that was one of the big things for me. Is like I never wanted to be like pigeonholed down into a style per se. But
well, surely any art teacher worth their salt would recognise that playing around with different styles is exactly what an artist should do in their journey to becoming the finished thing.
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. Like there were a couple like teachers, and my parents were incredibly supportive of me. But I live in a small town, man, and I don't think it was ever said with malice or with any ill intent. It was more just like, hey, yeah, this art thing is cool, but you want to make sure you go to university, make sure you get your degree, and like very sound advice. And like again, I'm not saying anyone was saying it maliciously. It was just I kind of had prepared myself for that. So again, I played with this negative space stuff, and eventually I decided to pursue art, became a graphic designer. I was working, I don't know if you guys have the Home Depot over.
We're aware of it. We have we have Home Base, which is a similar thing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But I was a designer for them. So I was literally like building ads and things like that. And a buddy of mine, Tariq Hassan, was working there. I met him there, and he mentioned he's like he was part of the art studio and invited me to come over and check it out. And I was blown away, man, because when I first came over, they had a George Gianti, who's obviously crushing it right now on Mandalorian, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Dexter Vines was a part of the studio, in Civil War, Batman, Superman. I mean, you name it. The guy's a legend, Old Man Logan. And they're, meeting them, they encouraged me to join the studio. And, it was a nice ego boost. I think in retrospect, they were also probably just like, hey man, if we get another guy in the studio, that cuts our rent down a bit. But in joining that, I started going to cons. And when I was surveying the landscape of cons, I realized like, this was back when everyone just did sketches. Like no one was selling prints at shows. And this is where, again, like that professional mindset comes in, is I was like, hey, I work, 60 hours a week on my day job at the Home Depot. Then I'm like aspiring to get into like comics and stuff like that. I don't want to go to a show on a weekend and just draw all weekend. So what's an avenue that I could, generate revenue and also make myself stand out? And I had the idea of like, I could do prints because I had all these connections with a lot of great printers. And in doing prints, what are things that I could do that could make myself stand out? And one of those was actually the negative space stuff. Right. So the Rogue, the Spider-Woman, there's a Carol Danvers Miss Marvel, and there was actually an original Emma Frost White Queen that I had done as a series of prints. And I seemed to get a lot of success out of them. which is why when I then eventually broke into comics, some of the first covers I was asked to do were actually that Spider-Man cover you saw. I was doing the covers for Witchblade at the time, and they requested a Witchblade cover in negative space. So kind of like organically grew to where I was trying to kind of lay down a foundation to see where it would lead. And it's been really cool because, like I said, I've been doing this. I mean, even just professionally, the negative space thing is 12, 15 years old or so.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It really didn't take off until very recently. So, you know, it's really fascinating to me. Like, I love to see how trends and the business of art grow and evolve.
I got a question for you, John. Obviously,
Sure.
these are really strong, you know, ideas, the negative space and the action figure. Do you have a concern that you're sort of going to get pigeonholed a little bit, and that people won't ask for other stuff because it's such a strong idea?
It's already happened multiple times that you know, so like I don't, well, because no, like I was the action figure guy for years, right? Like that was my bread and butter. That was who I was. And you know, it was funny because I remember people would be constantly asking for like, well, we'd like to get you to do a negative space variant. Or, you know, again, Marvel was like, hey, we want you to do negative space variants. And you know, so one of the things I started with Marvel was I actually was the first artist to approach them about doing artist exclusive variants. Because I saw the success of the Star Wars stuff and was like, hey, can I do this? You know, they're like, no one's ever asked us. So I kind of worked with like Marvel's legal department and internally to like get that program off the ground. And when I saw the success of the Boba Fett that I'd done, which was my first exclusive, and the success of other things, I was like, well, okay, what's next? So, because people were constantly saying, hey, we want you to do an action figure cover. Hey, you know, Marvel's asking me to do, I think it was 2000, it might have been 2017, 2018. I did like 124 covers one year. And then I did
that's
13 covers the next year.
It takes you a week then to do one cover. You must be burning.
Those are the negative spaces. The action figures, I'm cranking out like, I mean, I was doing those like one a day every couple of days.
Okay.
So when I realized that, hey, these action figure covers, and that's actually not mine. That is a J. Scott Campbell.
Yeah, get that right, Sam.
I want to make sure. No, dude, that cover's so amazing. I love J. Scott, but I don't ever want to take credit for anybody else's work. So no, I kept getting asked to do more action figure covers, and I was like, okay, what's next for me? Right? Like, and I decided to go back to the well and pull out the negative space. And it was funny because all these people were asking about doing action figure covers. And first of all, like, I'm not allowed to be, if you want me to do anything Marvel related, I'm not allowed to. Like, part of their process is you have to go to Marvel, don't go to the artist, because then it adds pressure to them. They can't even say, because, you know, I don't know what my schedule is going to be like for Marvel. I don't know if they've got that character already lined up, blah, blah, blah. So one of the things I would always mention to people is I'd be like, hey, I can't do action figure covers for you, but I could do a negative space cover if that's something you'd be interested in. And everyone's like, nah, we're good. We don't want any negative, that negative space thing. Like, we want you to do action figure stuff. And so I was like, cool, I guess I'm just going to run with this on my own. And that's why, you know, I did the Black Panther, the Iron Man, the Miss Marvel, and I did a variety of other negative space covers just for myself. And then eventually Marvel said, hey, you want to do some more, you want to do negative spaces now for us. And then that led to the Wolverine, which kind of blew up. And now this is kind of my thing. So I've been pigeonholed multiple times already in my career. And I keep trying to find the next option. Like, what's next for me? And I'm doing that now. Like, I've already got multiple ideas for what is after negative space. Right? Because, you know, when people are like, this is kind of a new thing, for me, it's like, it's 15 years old, man.
People are always discovering it, though, aren't they? That's the amazing thing about it.
I love it. It's such an honor. Like, I mean, like I said, that's not any, like, I'm not trying to say that in any negative capacity whatsoever. It's just,
excuse me.
It's just, as an artist, like, I want to what's next, right? Like I don't want to just be that guy that just does the one thing.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
on top of that, again, like everyone, like I've seen a ton of other people that are doing this now, and they're all. I saw this Superman cover recently that was like this, the family, and it was like
yes.
Oh my god, it was so good. Like it was
Stephen
so good.
Beach, he is an amazing artist.
Oh,
I keep on putting forward as cover artist of the year when we do our Comic Con awards, and it never gets past the first stage because I think I'm the only person who buys Action Comics out of us. But yeah, he's a great artist, and I only ever seen him do the Action Comics stuff. I know exactly the one you mean. It was issue 1051, the first of the big sort of thicker comic with loads of family. Yeah, that's one of his Stephen Beach's artworks, but that's got such a classic art line through it as well. Amazing.
Yeah, that's different, isn't it? That's very classic. Yeah,
that one right there.
That's the one.
God, that's incredible, man.
Isn't it just?
Yeah. That's so clever. Yeah,
and that's the regular cover as well. That's not a variant. That's the regular.
Really good use of color. I like
that. Man, and like that's going again back to that more like Coles Phillips mentality, where Phillips wouldn't do just a solid single color. He would do that like graphic design element behind it to help accentuate the negative space, right? So it gave him a lot more like freedom and flexibility. But I mean, there's so much cool stuff going on there, from like the fact that, you know, Superboy's knee is kind of behind the blue, but like part of it is coming out. Like, it's just, I love seeing it, man. And I love comic book art.
Yeah.
You know?
Don't we all on this show? Something we've all got in common, at least.
Come to the right place, John.
Yeah, you definitely come to the right place, mate. Talking of comic book art, you probably get asked this all the time. But have you ever looked at doing sequential work?
Yes.
And how?
Yeah, I've done a little bit in the past. I did a little like 2-pager, and then I did like a 7-pager for Witchblade and for Top Cow back in the day. The honest truth is, I haven't had a day off in 12 years with Marvel. So, like, it's not really one of those things I have the bandwidth for, per se, right now. And at this point, like, I'm painfully slow as an artist. So it's one of those things, like, I'd want to make sure it's the right thing that I have the right amount of time to do. But it's something I'm certainly interested in trying.
Right. Yeah. I suppose it's finding the right thing, isn't it? Something that you're really enthusiastic about. Because it's not something you do all the time. You don't want to just take on any project when it's going to be such a time-consuming effort to do it. You want it to be something that you really care about.
Yeah, well, no, I want to do something that, like, I feel that I can not only care about, like, on a personal level and a professional level, but like also artistically. You know, like I look at like a Mobius kind of thing, where it's like, you know, there's so many amazing European artists, Japanese artists especially, that, like, you know, they're not set to this like monthly deadline. They do their thing and they release it when it gets done. And it's, you know, some panels you're like, or some pages you're like, wow, I think that probably took them like a couple days to do. And then there's other ones you're like, did you spend a month on that single page? Like, it's so in depth and so beautiful, but like it tells, it's part of the story, right? You know, it's not, because they're looking at the art not just as a panel or a page, they're looking at it as the entire, like, the narrative structure. And I'd want to be able to delve into that type of thing where I can get really tripped out, you know, and do all the crazy cool things that I'd want to do, not feeling constrained with, dude, I got to get this page done today. Like,
yeah. I suppose there's a couple of options there, isn't there? Because obviously you could look at, as you said, in Europe, it is very different, the working process. Like in France, you can get a project where you have a set amount of time, but it's a lot more time than you'd have on a monthly book, you know? That's one way you could approach it, maybe as a French publisher, or do something yourself of your own. You know, publish your own book, so that you could take as much time as you liked. That would be quite exciting. Is that something you've ever thought about doing?
Yes, actually, it is. You know, that's one of those things. Like I've struggled, especially as of late. Like, I'm getting older, right? You know, and I'm starting to feel certain things that I think a lot of people, when they kind of reach their 40s, start to feel. And one of those things is like, hey, you know, I've worked really hard to establish who I am and what I do, but I think there's also comes a time where it's like, hey, you don't have forever to do these things that you want to do. And
yes,
as an artist, like there are certain things it's like I'd like to maybe take a stab at doing, and maybe taking some time off and just being an artist again without the professional side of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I hear this so often. I go around different cons and all of that. People I hear some artists even talk about, I've only got so many comics left in me. And I think that's more when you're approaching your 50s as opposed to going into your 40s, where you really, and I think because we've lost so many greats in the comic book world over the last few years or so.
So many, man. So many.
I think people are just reevaluating the work they've done in the past, where they are now. And like you say, what you want to do, not what your legacy is necessarily, but what you want to do as an artist. And I think you're kind of that guy, John, who'll find that time, find that space. Do you know what I mean? I think there's certain artists who the machine will take them over. You don't come across to me as one of those kind of people. I think you can step back from the machine, put it on pause, and do your own thing when you're ready to, mate.
I hope so. I feel very blessed and honored. I love the work I do, and I love what I've been able to do and the opportunities I've had. Because even some of the things I want to do fit within the umbrella of the machine. For example, I'd be lying if it wasn't like I've got an idea for a Star Wars story that I'd love to draw. Here's a concept I have. But then there's also just the things of I'd love to paint a still life sometime. You kind of joke in art school of like, oh God, we got to paint fruit again or whatever.
That old chestnut. I remember that well.
Yeah, I'm literally at a point right now where I'm like, I think it would be really cool to just paint a bowl of fruit, and because art, especially as a professional artist, it's such this weird thing where I have this philosophy where like art is owned by the viewer, right? Like the moment I publish something, it's not mine anymore. It's yours. It's anybody's. You can hate it, you can love it, you can make whatever comment you want. But the beauty of being an artist is like for a brief period of time when you create it, it is yours. It's exclusively mine. Like the moment I share it it's no longer just mine uniquely. And I'd like to get back to that at some point. Like that's where I think I can be really creative and try and create something new and unique. I've got some styles and techniques that I've been wanting to try that I'll be honest, I've never seen anyone else do. So I was kind of wanting just to play with these things, and if they suck, hey man, like I can be my own judge for a while and the world will never know.
Yeah. I think it's a great exercise to do that, isn't it? Because you can get sort of when you're on the grind. I worked sort of exclusively as an illustrator for a while, not for very long, unfortunately, but I found that you
just long enough to finish the first picture. They said, "Hold on a minute, get out of here."
Well, I found that when you're on the grind, as it were, you do sort of stagnate a little bit because you're just putting out the work. But when you step back and you start working for yourself again, just doing your own thing, that's when you start to experiment more, and when you start to really make some leaps and bounds. Really,
100%, man. I mean, especially again with the nature of how I try to operate my business, which is like I know where my bread is buttered. I know that I could, just like the story earlier about the negative space, like I could produce something right now that is completely new and fresh, but I don't know if that's going to be financially viable at the moment. Like it's got to be, you got to find the right time to strike with it and produce enough and get it fine-tuned enough that when is everyone else going to be ready for it as much as I'm ready to present it? When is it going to be accepted at this point? And also then like, just like I said, with the negative space, dripping it in there, like it's been there for forever. It just took a while for like it to get up to speed. And it took enough of them to where like, hey, here's Wolverine, bam, the ice is broke. Now it's kind of a thing. I'm just looking forward to that opportunity to just, like I said, just be an artist again, man, for a while. You know, I remember Ollie, like some of that street art, man, you showed us. Like, I think about that all the time. Like,
yeah, they are ridiculously. I mean, I can't believe how ridiculously talented some of my friends are. You know, the ones in the comic book world and the street art world. And I keep on talking to them. And for the street artists, they don't seem to have either that ability to break into professionalism, because people still see street art as vandalism. And I've got a great piece of street art here on the wall. And it's just made out of resin. It's made out of wood. It's a piece of joy and beauty that that takes pride of place. And that's in between the art. There are artists out there who are working dead end jobs. There's a great one, Suki Ten, working dead end jobs and painting at the weekend, and they just can't seem to break through. You see, it was a pleasure showing you that, and also the art museum as well. Birmingham sort of like got such a great art museum. But here's some of the older sort of street art. But of course, I suppose the whole thing about street art is it's the same attitude. Once it's out there, it's not their art any longer. And they've even got the attitude of this will be painted over by tomorrow, so I really can't be attached to it. Half the stuff we're seeing now, that's all gone. But there's other pieces that we've managed to put up there that have stayed in, year out kind of thing. We've now got a massive art trail running around all of Birmingham, John, where you can just spend a whole day just looking at the many different sort of murals. He's a very good artist. That's Snub 23. Obviously takes a lot of his inspiration from 2000 AD, but he's one of the few professional artists out there making money, selling prints, and doing well for himself. There is that profession to be in. But again, I get the best of both worlds, John. I see the art coming out of the comic book world, and I see the art coming out of the graffiti world. And I think that's why I'm so passionate about it. I am that frustrated artist who, like you, John, was told you're never going to be an artist, went to art college. We don't do comic book art here. It's graphic art or nothing else. And it's interesting how many other artists from that era, Steve Pugh, who's doing Billionaire Island at the moment with Mark Russell, these artists were told they were no good, they weren't going to be able to do what they could, and they still had that sort of fortitude and sort of connection around them to break in.
And it's not always, is it? It's not always that they're told they're not good. They're told that that's not a viable.
Not
career.
viable. No, it wasn't.
You know what I mean?
No.
I think that's the hardest thing, is that even though some teachers or influential people in your life will think, oh yeah, that's really great, but you need to get a proper job, don't you? That's the attitude, I think.
Well, but I think that's also, it's such an old mindset, right? Like that mentality, because I look at myself and my generation is like, we are the last of kind of the old, we're kind of the in-between generation, right? Like any generation before us, it was, if you want to be an artist, like you got to go work for somebody, you got to go work at a studio, or you're going to be like one of like 0.025% of the population that becomes like a fine artist, if you will.
Yeah.
Whereas in the next generation, the newer generation, like they don't need Marvel, like per se, like, right? Like it's awesome to do. And I'm not, again, trying to diminish it, but I know my path would be completely different if I would have come up 10 years later, because I would have taken like that street art stuff. And the beauty of the internet is the world has become so much smaller. And as an artist, how many people does it really take to make a living being an artist anymore? Like if you can find 1,000 people that are like fans, like diehard fans, I think a fan would gladly give you $100 a year. If you got 1,000 of those, you're making $100,000 a year. Like that ain't bad.
Yeah, and it's achievable, isn't it? That's the beauty of it. If you can get those sort of, for want of a better expression, fans, or followers or whatever.
Well, it's different. I mean, here's the thing, John. My daughter, she's 18 in July. I dare say your kids are great. I know. She's got the opportunities I never had. So she's now finishing off her animation course before going to university to do animation. It is a totally different world out there. She's got these great opportunities that I never had, you maybe never had when you were growing up as well. You know, she's about to start a whole new career as an animator. She's got her own little YouTube channel, 52,000 followers.
Yeah,
She won't exactly. She doesn't tell me her channel. She won't share that with me. But she can't wait. But it's interesting, John. You know, she's going to be the artist I always wanted to be. No, don't get me wrong. Nothing. I'm glad my life went the way it did. I've always aimed for mediocrity, and so I've managed to achieve that. I haven't had to work hard.
But it is different for the younger ones, isn't it?
Different.
Definitely. Yeah. And the artists now can become everything, you know, and they have to really, you know, if you want to make it, you know, by yourself. Well, you are the business person.
Well, you're right, John, aren't you? I mean, there must be a time when you're ready to jump from negative space and action figures into something new. Surely, you know, you've got a hardcore sort of, I don't need to say fandom, a hardcore group of people who will follow your next move, because what they know is they're going to get that quality that clearly they're part of their buying into the comic is to get that piece of art, to be able to have it as part of their collection. And so looking at the interaction, particularly on Facebook, there does seem to be a good familiar set of people who turn up all the time and very interested. I mean, surely that must give you some safety for the next time you think, I'm going to experiment with something different here. It's not as much a leap of faith as maybe it would have been 12 years ago, for example.
100%. And thank you so much for saying that, because that is something that I work as hard on as my art. And that is like, I almost feel like I say it so much that I'm nervous that people are just going to think that it's like PR speak, like just total PR bullshit. I am so grateful to every person that buys or is a fan of my art. It means the absolute world to me. Like, again, I'm a farm boy from Lafayette, Indiana, who figured I'd probably be baling hay and slaughtering pigs the rest of my life. And the idea that the fact that I'm here talking to two friends of mine from across the pond is a mind-blowing experience. And that is something that I don't take for granted. And I appreciate that my art plays a role in that. But I think equally as much, it's treating everyone with respect that decides that they would like to interact or support me. Like that means so much. I'm terrible at social media. Like I openly acknowledge it, but you know, you mentioned earlier about the idea of doing sketches till the end of the show. Like that wasn't hard work. I can't fathom why anyone wouldn't do that. I mean, you guys brought me over to your country as a guest, and the least I could do to every person that showed up that wanted a drawing is to sit there and I got brought to your country to draw pictures. Like, that's a pretty fair deal in my book.
If only every guest looked at it that way, John. You know, your attitude is actually quite unique but very much appreciated.
Well, that saddens me, because I think that should be. I mean, everyone that our industry is not that big, man. Like, let's just be honest. Like, let's just dispense with the whatever. Like, the comic book industry is not the movie industry. Like, and I think it's so important that we've got this group of people that are, it's almost like a family. Like, it's so cool. Like, I see the same people and I get to know them. I go out and have dinner with them, right? It's not just like, oh, hey, thanks, where's my check next? Like, I've got to know so many of those people on Facebook that they're not just a name. It's not just a, you know, an avatar. Like, I know that person, and they're all wonderful people. And the fact that they're gracious enough, like, they're supporting my work doesn't change the fact that I consider them a friend or that they're an awesome person. And if you want to buy my stuff, man, thank you so much. If you don't, like, I get it. Like, it's cool. But that's something I always really strive to do is, again, just let people know that it means the world to me and that I'll do whatever I can to support them.
I think people really got that impression at the show, definitely, mate. Because the feedback we got afterwards. I mean, you'll know as well, Ollie. You know how people spoke about John, and definitely one of our favourite guests of all time.
Thank you, man.
Well, you'd moved it back to the Holiday Inn that time. The whole weekend was a very special weekend, I think. You know what I mean? You had a lot of great guests there, and because it was over 2 days, I think there was a good deal of good socialising and. No, it was only over 1 day, wasn't it? But no, because you had the party on the Friday night where people were able to, and this is what I mean about the comic book world, John. I always feel blessed. I mean, I started off just doing local conventions for Bleeding Cool and built my own sort of, I suppose, my own position because I wanted to review comic books. I wanted to talk up the comic book industry at a time when on social media everything was very negative. And even to this day, I get ribbed by the amount of 10s and 9s I give out my reviews. So, because I'm going to pick up a comic I like. I'm not going to pick up a comic I don't like. So that's why I'm often going to get sort of, and numbers are arbitrary anyway. So, to me, if it's good, it's going to be a 9 or a 10. But by doing that, I look back, John, and I think, how privileged at meeting people like you, having that day out with you and the family, and also all the other people I've met over the, who I'd like to think I could call my friends. And I would never have had that if I hadn't, I suppose, fought so hard on Bleeding Cool to do more than just cover comic conventions where there's not many comic artists. I wouldn't have met Shane. I wouldn't have done all of the things that I've done over the last 8 or 9 years that give me great joy. And in your covers, I see the joy you must take in producing these really exquisite piece of artwork. Each face is different. There's clearly been thought put into the poses. It goes without saying. It was great you were explaining that, but I could see there's clearly an image there before everything gets taken out. And I think as much as you're an innovator, I think it's just that joy, that talent that speaks out to fans as well. And you say you're not good at social media. That's bullshit. On Facebook, you are such a friendly guy. You take the time out to talk to these many, many people. Do you know what I mean? You don't have to do that. You wouldn't have to. But I think there's a lot of people out there who, are fighting your corner there, John, and really pleased the stuff you're producing, week in, week out, month in, month out. It's just great stuff. I'm rambling on now, but it's just fucking great artwork, isn't it, Shane? It's just great artwork.
It is great.
And like you say, it's great that people can own a copy of it, and it's theirs, isn't it? Like you say, art is for everybody. I remember Brian Boland having that idea when he goes, right, I'll just do digital, because the minute I put that comic out there, everyone's got a copy of it. Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, good way of looking at it. So what's next then, John?
He's not going to tell us what's next. He's not going to give
what's on the horizon? What's on the horizon? Is there anything you can tell us about the future?
I don't even know. Like
the future.
Even though.
Well, so it's weird. So like if you've noticed in the past couple of years, I've actually slowed down a little bit on the comic book work because, and I'm not sure. My non-disclosures on some things are so tightly lipped. I've been working on a couple movies the past couple of years.
Cool.
I think one of them might be getting released here in the next year, which I'm really excited about. I saw a trailer for it, but I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about it or even say what my involvement.
We don't want to get you in trouble, John.
Yeah,
I know a few years ago you actually did action figure backing boards, didn't you, for Marvel?
That was another thing. Yeah,
that was really cool. I thought when that came out.
Yeah. I've been really that was such a great gig, man. I mean, to go from like the full circleness of it was super great.
There's only nerds like us going to know in the comic in the toy shop. Hey, that's John's work. That is.
There you go, and that's actually, man, just working with Hasbro, there's been something also that's just been an absolute joy, to go into there and to work on multiple different properties. And
did you do the big Galactus for Hasbro?
I did. Yes.
That's such an amazing.
Awesome.
I'd have it just for the box alone, John. Do you
Buy the
get one of
box.
those Galactus figures then, seeing as you did?
I'm supposed to. I haven't gotten them yet.
Oh,
but-
come on. They got to deliver it, man.
It
Well,
looks
it-
absolutely amazing.
No, there's a reason why my background is blurred because my office is an absolute shithole right now. There's
It's
no
not going
room
to do
for
with
it.
NDAs.
Yeah.
But
Loads of action figures in the background.
oh yes, well, they're all in the boxes right now. I'm actually renovating my office, so all my junk is in here right now before I can get everything set up. But yeah, man, like as far as what's next, I mean, Star Wars is chugging along. We're now doing the prequel characters for the action figure covers, which has been really fun. Like, I got to draw Keira Knightley for the first time ever. That was kind of cool.
All right.
Obviously, I'm a huge Ewan McGregor fan, so being able to paint Owen, because it's like Star Wars is so weird, right? Because with Marvel, whenever I do artwork for them, I try and I try and make every character unique. Like, it's a very important facet of my art, right? Like, I don't want it to be where it's like it's basically the same face with with some different hair and that's it. And with Marvel, you can get into big trouble. Like, I've gotten several images of, for example, Captain America that I've had to redraw because they're like, oh, he looks too much like Chris Evans, and I don't use Chris Evans as my reference.
Right.
I actually always felt that Steve Rogers was more of like a Paul Newman looking kind of guy.
Yeah, I like that take. Yeah,
but every once in a while they'll pull it back. Whereas with Star Wars, it has to be on model. Like, they own those likenesses, so it's really kind of fun to be able to actually like try to draw Obi-Wan Kenobi, like not Obi-Wan Kenobi-esque, or the other characters. So like that's super cool. So that there's that going on. There's obviously some more negative space in the works. I've got another exclusive around the corner that I'm really excited about. It was one I was hoping to do last year. That, oh my god, yeah. How cool is that?
That's great.
That's when you know you've made it.
Yeah.
I've actually got that comic myself. Actually, I did get that one.
Awesome, man.
Yeah, it's cool. And of course, you did one for us at the show, the Venom action figure,
which that was so cool. Because I don't get a chance to work on Venom that often, and he's one of my favorite characters. So
that was great.
We
have to thank sort of Diamond for facilitating that. Diamond UK sort of made that happen. I guess we couldn't have done it without them. So thanks to Diamond UK for making that happen. But that was a great cover, and I've got a copy, obviously, because it's just it's a precious memory,
Oh yeah, 100%, man.
So nice to have one of those.
And that's one of the fun things also just being an artist is I can look back at some of those old covers and I can literally remember what was going on in my life when I was painting. That's always such a joy to, think of, oh man, I remember like my kids were doing this at the time, or
Yeah, I have that with comics. So when I was younger, because my mum was also afraid of flying, whenever we went over to Germany, we'd go via train and then boat overnight. So for me, it was like having a bag of comics. And I remember, a bit like you, I remember any particular comic, reading it on a particular journey, going to Germany or coming back again. I think you've got so much strong memories with things from childhood, and comics were such All-Star Squadron. I seem to remember reading a lot of All-Star Squadron, traveling to Germany and back again. And a lot of those comics just stood out. I learned a lot about the history of World War II and a lot of the Golden Age superheroes who were left behind, because obviously the JSA went off to fight. But great memories, just sticking with you, those comic memories.
Also, I don't know about you guys, but when I was younger, a lot of the comics, I used to read old comics and they'd have a certain smell. And now when I smell old comics, it takes me straight back to those childhood days of reading those old classic, Kirby and Ditko books that my cousin would lend me, and I'd smell a comic. Instantly those images would come flooding back,
Oh man, there's times where I'll be like online, I'll be looking up for some reference or something like that. And I'll come across like panels or pages of old books and I'll just see it. And it's like for a brief second, I'm back in high school or something, right? I'll see like a a Jim Lee or an Andy Kubert, and I'll just be like, oh my God. It's almost like you get that feeling of like the girl you had a crush on at the time. Like it all just like floods. Like you're literally
yeah.
Totally get that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
We were more into comics than girls, probably, weren't we?
Speak for yourself, Shane. You know, you could have both. You know, I tried. For a little part of like the late 80s, comics were quite a cool thing. And being the only guy into comics, I would take people to the local comic shop in Liverpool, which was one train away, because I grew up in North Wales, John. And Liverpool was the biggest city closest, which had a comic shop. But you had to take one doddery old train there and back again. And when you got there, it was like a dirty old comic shop run by the most miserable person who also sewn porno mags in the back as well. So it was called Chapter One in Liverpool, and it was the only place you could go and get direct market comic. It's where I got Watchmen. It's where I got Dark Knight Returns. It doesn't exist anymore.
Wow.
But it was quite a grim little book shop. Great comics, but porn in the back.
They're great, those old bookshops that also sold porn and comics. You know, there was one in Birmingham called Reader's World. Do you remember that one, Ollie?
I do remember that one. Yeah,
it was great. The comics were cheap as well, because for a while he didn't know what they were worth, and I remember buying loads of Silver Age stuff for like 10p a pop. You know, and it was heaven. And then one day he realised what they were worth, and all the prices.
I can imagine.
But great memories, and that shop had that smell. The whole shop had that old paper smell. You know, which is absolutely fantastic. I must say, you know, thank you, Jason Gunter, for all your comments tonight. You've made lots and lots of comments. Jason from South Wales, thank you for commenting on the show and joining us. Thanks to everyone who's commented. We've had a lot of comments. I haven't been able to show them all because we've had so many, and we've had some spammers as well, as we always get when we have a popular guest. The spammers come out of the woodwork, but we just ignore them.
Better today.
You'd think so, wouldn't
you?
You know? So thanks to everyone who commented. Oh, we've got a response. My pleasure. Been brilliant. Thank you, Jason. I think Jason is a big fan of yours, John.
Well, he said he had quite a few sort of 9.8 grading. I think it was 36 copies or something like that. So obviously a long time fan.
There you go.
36. There we
go. Thank you very, very much, man. I really, really do appreciate it.
Wow.
That's fantastic, isn't it? And it is nice, isn't it, to interact with the people who, you know, as you've said, you know, with who support you. There's nothing quite like it when somebody appreciates your work, and it's a nice feeling.
And are you still the weirdo hippie artist who lives in a community where everyone's got a proper job?
Yes, I do. It's still super weird.
Do people know what you do, or just they don't understand what you do?
You know, one of the nicest things about the Marvel movies is that I think it's added some legitimacy to my career path.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, I still get the every once in a while, like, so you invented Spider-Man, right? And it's like, no, I didn't invent Spider-Man. But... Just
take it. Just say yes.
Yeah.
They won't know. Just I'll take that one. A friend of mine, actually, who's a comic artist, and obviously being a comic artist, you know, you go out to the shop or whatever, and his neighbours all thought he was a drug dealer.
No,
because he was just like, he just went out to the shop every now and again to buy some beer, or, you know, to meet a friend, and his neighbours were watching him. It's like, what does he do? He must be a drug dealer.
Well, I think it's the bags under the eyes from no sleep. You know, it all kind of adds up in the end.
Sociable hours. You know, the strange people occasionally coming around your house. You know.
Yeah.
Oh, we've got competition here. Gary,
that's my dad, actually.
Hey!
So.
I'm his biggest fan. He said. Oh, isn't that sweet? Oh, that's nice.
That is super nice. Like I said,
does the artistic gene run in the family then, John?
Yes, it does. My dad is an artist as well. My grandmother was an artist. So it was just one of those things. Oh my God. And there's Lori. Lori Schragi. That is the lady that she hooks you up with all your books if you order from me. So
right. So it's good to know that she's a fan. Otherwise,
Yeah.
life could become very difficult very quickly.
I don't know if she's a fan as much as she's a fan of paychecks. I think she
Yeah.
loves those checks.
Yeah, she's
Say
paid
it how
to be
it
a
is.
fan.
Say it how it is. Keep it
Yeah.
real. Nice to meet you, Laurie. Thanks for coming on the show.
Laurie's another person. If Laura, like, I'm half tempted to like literally take Laurie on trips with me to the shows. Her and Jen go way back. They're good. They're really good friends. And you know, it's one of those like, I think there are as many people that want to meet me as would want to meet Laurie and Jen, because they're the ones that hook them up. Like, she knows.
They make the magic work.
They make
You're like the great and powerful Wizard of Oz. They're behind the curtain, making it all work.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm just a big floating green head, man. Like, I was going to call Laurie an Oompa Loompa, but then I realized, or I'm sorry, a Munchkin, but then I thought better.
I might get into trouble for that one, mate.
Are you ready for Easter then, John? Do you have Good Friday as a public holiday in America?
I don't think it's a public holiday, but I mean,
really, I don't know, because we have like
No, they
Friday off, Sunday off, and Monday off as well. We have like a big long weekend now.
oh wow, nice.
Long weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's nice. Yeah.
You know, I shouldn't say that. I don't know what the rest of the world is doing. I've got a deadline on Monday, and I've got a deadline
really?
tomorrow. So,
Oh,
no.
Well, in that case, then we mustn't keep you too much longer. I've got one little question from Chris Ball. You may remember from Ice, who was one of the crew. Who were the comic artists who inspired you?
oh man, okay. This might get like kind of a long answer, as all my other answers have been. Okay, so this is one of my this is advice for young artists. So my comic book artists that inspired me were like, obviously I'm a 90s kid, so Jim Lee, the Kuberts. Like, basically if you worked on X-Men, I would loved your work. But one of those like epiphany moments in my life was, and this is a shout out to all the art teachers of the world too, Ollie. That you can appreciate this. The idea that I was looking at Jim Lee, and I wanted to draw like Jim Lee, like so badly. Like that was if I could draw like Jim Lee, I'd be the best. But then at one point I had this idea of like, well, who does Jim Lee want to draw like? And that's when I discovered Art Adams. And then I was like, well, who does Art Adams want to draw like?
Right.
And then I keep going back and back and back. And like, you eventually realize like they all want to be the masters, man. They all want to be Rembrandt. They all want to be like, it all stems from that. And that's where that concept of, I don't want to draw like Jim Lee anymore. Like, I want to take elements of Jim Lee's work and incorporate it into who I am. And as an artist, never stop growing, and always like, if I could become Rembrandt, like, let's just say I work hard enough and I can, and actually another funny story. I had this whole spiel whenever I go to universities and speak about how Rembrandt's the greatest artist ever. And, you know, all the college kids would blow smoke up my ass and agree with me and make me feel all pretentious and cool. And I went and spoke with my daughters at the time. She was in like 3rd grade, and I went and spoke to her art class. And I kind of gave the same spiel, but I kind of dumbed it down, obviously, for 3rd graders. And I was like, so like, you know, there's amazing artists like Rembrandt. I want to draw like Rembrandt because he's the best artist ever. And the kid looked at me, one of the kids in the class, and he's like, Rembrandt's terrible. Like, Yu-Gi-Oh is the greatest art ever.
Brilliant.
And like, for a brief second, I was like offended. And then I quickly realized, I'm like, no, the kid's 100% right. Like, because it's all subjective. And it became that, like, the revelation that art is a journey with no destination became like a fundamental part of who I am. Like, if I became Rembrandt, I'm far away from Yu-Gi-Oh! So now I've got to go work towards Yu-Gi-Oh! And if I become just like Yu-Gi-Oh! Art or Pokemon art, then I'm far, like, you're always evolving and growing. And I think the moment, you know, we talk about burning people out, I think that happens when you become stagnant. And I always want to try and find what that next thing is, what the next thing creatively and artistically I can do to become a better artist, because it never stops.
And it's a wonderful journey, isn't it? When you discover, I remember when I was quite young, for me, it was like, I loved Frank Miller's Daredevil, and I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. Then I discovered Neil Adams, then I discovered John Buscema, and you just keep going, and then you go out of comics and you go into, as you say, the Renaissance, for example, or mannerism. I loved mannerist paintings, and you discover all this art history, and it's a great journey to go on as an artist, isn't it? That discovery of where the stuff that you love now, where it's come from and what its origins are.
Oh, 100%. And I think you also you learn to appreciate things differently.
Yeah.
Because I remember when I'm a 90s kid. So I used to look at Kirby stuff. And even in the late 90s, I discovered this little artist you guys might be familiar with named Frank Quietly. And I was like, God, he's terrible. All the women are ugly. And this guy, what is going on with this? They're all mushy and yucky. But then it's I started studying more art and getting into and delving into why they do this. Where is this coming from? Frank Quietly is probably my favorite artist now. I have had the pleasure of meeting him. He is a hero of mine. But I wasn't ready for him at that point in my life. Their art is so good.
Do you know what? You're right. I never got Gene Colan until much later on in life. Carlos Escazera as well on 2000. There's certain artists I just didn't get. And it comes with experience, it comes with age, it comes with your tastes changing. But for me, Gene Colan on sort of the 80s comics, Batman, it just seems to be a mess. Little did I know, you take away the colour and suddenly you see that artwork. And as you get older, you realise what a master he was. That's a great Frank Quietly. Isn't it all made up of words as well, his beard strands?
It's an incredible.
I'm sure that I'm sure this was done for his 50th birthday about 10 years ago. There's a whole book of essays about Alan Moore, and I remember this being in there. And I'm sure if you zoom in on the beard, there's words that make up some of the individual strands. That's how unique Frank Quietly was.
Great artist.
Still is.
Still is. He's still with us. He hasn't gone yet. Just in case anyone was worried there. So we have gone over the hour, John.
Oh, sorry, gentlemen.
No.
We love talking to you,
John.
We're just aware that you're a very busy man. So we have got there's comments coming in, but we haven't got time to answer them all. But thank you to everyone in the comments. We really appreciate it. And thank you, John, for coming onto the show and talking to us about just crap really that we like to talk about, which is comics. It's just been really, really good. And to get your insights as well. Thank you so much, mate.
Thank you guys so much for having me back, man. And it's it's just the old times. I'm back in Birmingham, man. I'm ready to go get some curry and look at some cool art.
One day, mate. One
day we'll get you back across the pond.
I would travel again in a couple. At some point, I will come back to Europe because, man, it was just the best time ever. And my wife and my girls, they had such a lovely. You guys could not have been more gracious hosts.
It was our pleasure.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome, mate. And well, have yourself a great evening. Good luck with that deadline.
Thank you.
And we'll speak. To
enjoy
you
the rest of your day, John. As ours come to an end, you enjoy you've got quite a big chunk of the day left, haven't you?
Yeah, a good part,
Nice.
Just one more time, Sam had to share that picture. All right, Sam, let's play out on the video now, shall we, mate? Thanks, John. All the best to you,
All the best, John, mate.
Cheers, gentlemen. Thank you.